Every 11 seconds, there's a new ransomware attack. Oil pipelines, universities, corporations, all paying millions of dollars. Barracuda says, don't pay the ransom. Before a ransomware attack occurs, train your teams to recognize an attack and use anti-phishing technology. Protect your applications, and they can't get onto your network. Simple backup and restore solutions quickly recover your data without paying the ransom. Build your ransomware protection plan now by visiting securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. I've got a quick announcement. Do I? I do. Don't miss any of your favorite Security Weekly content by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe. That's right. You can subscribe to all of our shows on the Security Weekly Network via your favorite podcast catcher. Download those episodes right to your phone. Join our mailing list, our Discord server, which has been amazing. Follow us on social media and our streaming platforms, all at securityweekly.com/subscribe. CRA's Business Intelligence Unit has launched its next survey on Zero Trust. What are your barriers to Zero Trust implementation? Take the survey and enter to win a drawing for a $500 Tango card by visiting securityweekly.com/Zero Trust. I'm not sure what a Tango card is, but if it's worth $500, I think you should do that.
You can use it in the metaverse.
With a stinky dinky?
Hazuki.
I don't know what we were talking about during the break. It was your own language. I'm old now.
Yep.
Hey.
Partying with Snoop.
Let's talk about some security news. What do you say?
Yeah.
Where do you want to start?
I was curious if you had dug into the WordPress RCE stuff. That seemed like kind of your cup of tea.
It's shameful, dude. It's really, it is like how not to code. Well, if you want to know how to code PHP, so there's a really easy remote file include vulnerability, go look at the code and then do that in your own code where you're taking a request parameter and then including that in a file path that you reference in your code.
Oh shit, really?
This is how we get WordPress plugin vulnerabilities. Then they told the author of the plugin that they had a bug and the author patched it and they're like, no, that really didn't patch it. So we had to patch it again. Mm-hmm. This just, it really, I need to drink. I need to drink. This drives me to drink. Picked a hell of a day to stop drinking.
WordPress is so prevalently used like everywhere. It is still the most common backend CRM or whatever the hell they call it now. And you cannot get away from plugins. Like even talking to untechnical people, they're always asking me like, I got all these plugins here and I can't seem to get this plugin to work with this plugin. I'm like, I am scared to death of like what you've got on your site. Like you see most of the hosting for C2 or even back channel comms for a lot of APT groups, you'll see unlisted directories and just raw HTML files. And almost always those are linked up back to a backend WordPress or some plugin for WordPress.
You really have to be super careful what plugins you're running in your WordPress instance.
But can you deploy a secure WordPress? I mean, this goes back to like call it 5 years ago with Windows, maybe even 7 years ago. We'll be more gentle. But can you deploy a secure WordPress instance and still have good functionality and keep it up to date?
No.
Like relying on third-party libraries, right? And code.
There are some things you can do. I mean, 5 years ago, the auto update wasn't there for WordPress. It's there now. It'll auto update plugins and the main code base, and most plugins support it. I think the part of the problem is people try all these plugins and they never throw them away. But the other thing you're going to need in WordPress is a WAF that works.
Yeah,
because you don't know where the next vulnerabilities come in.
So Lee, it's funny you say that. I do both those things for the WordPress instances I maintain. I have a hosting provider that does the WAF portion. And I regularly prune plugins. Like if plugins get installed, if they're not needed anymore, I nix those and I get them out. And then I am as religious as I can be about making sure PHP, WordPress, your plugins, and your themes. So all four of those things have to be up to date. WP Engine does a great job of like making that easy for me and notifying me when things are out of date. They also, a quick plug for WP Engine, who exclusively is our hosting provider for WordPress. They also will flag vulnerable plugins, and like if you don't update them, or you've just got a plugin that they're like, no, this is on our list of bad plugins that you can't run, they'll remove it for you. Like they give you a time window, and if you don't update it or remove it, depending on like which bad list it's on, they'll just take care of that shit for you. And they're like, nope, you're not running that shit on our platform, right? Because they have to protect the platform as well. So I really like choosing a good hosting provider and just being really diligent about keeping everything up to date, and then really scrutinizing every single plugin. Like I like to go for ones that are paid and ones that have a lot of downloads and a lot of support. If it's just, I mean, I don't want to like knock anyone or get anyone offended, but if it's some Joe Schmo that wrote a plugin, I'm like, yeah, no, I don't need that functionality that bad. Sorry. Like I'll write a crappy plugin myself before I go, some Joe Schmo plugin.
Is the WAF an additional cost that's usually offered at the provider?
No. Like if I try and scan my WP Engine instance with a my rate of tools, like pretty quickly, I mean, those of us have been doing pen testing for any amount of time.
Yep.
Like but there's a lot of indicators that you're like, there's something blocking me. And that's happened for years now with WP Engine. So I got to like go to support, like, hey, can you whitelist my IP? Because like I really want to like find the issues. Like I love the blocking that you're doing. Don't remove that. That's awesome. Keep that there. But just whitelist my IP.
I have to do my due diligence.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, Tyler, I know what you and I have discussed at length some of this stuff in the past, and one of the solutions that we've seen work is to put your WordPress server in a secure enclave, as it were, access it with a Bastion host.
Yep.
So the only limited access to that, and that WordPress site never sees the light of the internet.
Yeah,
and uses and uses a plugin to export the contents of the WordPress site as static HTML, which gets pushed to a server that does have access.
Slight variation on that. Or you build like a Node React front end to your WordPress site, and your trusted content creators interact with WordPress. The public internet doesn't interact with WordPress. Only your trusted content creators do. And there's a Node React front end or AWS front end in whatever language you want that's then displaying that content. So your WordPress instance is never exposed to the internet. The database is never exposed. It's only your trusted content, because your trusted content creators are really the only ones that need to interact with WordPress. The public internet, like actually most of that content is served through caching servers and all that other stuff. You just need some kind of other front end.
Tyler, you were saying something there?
The other thing that's out now is that WordPress now has a health check in their dashboard. I'm not completely down with it, but I like it because for somebody who really doesn't have a lot of security background, it gives them things to make sure they got right. And it's a pretty good checklist of stuff.
Yeah. WP Engine does some of that for you too. Like they manage all your PHP updates, which is nice. And they give you multiple environments as well, which is, I think, is super important, because you may want to try a plugin and see if it works. Or some of the plugins that could be vulnerable, also like maintenance plugins. So they're like, search and replace through your, I mean, you can do some of this manually through the database. There's some times where I've been in a situation where I'm like, it'd be nice to have like a graphical interface for me to like search and replace and do maintenance on content or whatever. And you install those plugins. I mean, basically you can do it in development. You can actually use Git to manage your different WordPress environments. So you can have a dev, a QA, and a production. Your dev and QA, you require authentication to get to them. So the public internet, unless they have the password or guess the password, doesn't have access to that WordPress environment, only your production. So you can do whatever you want in those environments. And then you can push code. There's multiple ways, at least in WP Engine. You can roll this all yourself if you really want to, which I've been like, I'd rather pay WP Engine to do it for me. You could conceivably roll it yourself, right, and use Git in other technologies, in AWS or Azure or whatever cloud environment, and do it yourself and roll these different environments so code rolls up into production. And there's a lot of places doing it that way too. Lightsail, Amazon's Lightsail, you can spin up a WordPress. So there's lots of ways to do that. I haven't been so brave to
sucks.
like... it requires a lot of care and feeding, and I think most, Josh, will like the functionality that WordPress provides,
Right.
and will go through some of that pain and suffering to go through the lengths of maintaining it and securing it to have that. I mean, one, like compatibility and interoperability that WordPress provides. Because I mean, it's got an API. You know, there's lots of plugins and functionality available,
else do you do
themes,
it?
all that stuff, right? So for that trade-off is you got to spend some time with maintenance, and I think rather than coding it yourself or maybe implementing something else, you go with what's most mainstream and getting the most attention. Because you can also get there's more WordPress developers out there. This is my guess. I haven't done the research, right? But I think the large population of people who can help you with your website, majority of them know WordPress, right? Like you can go get a WordPress developer, and I mean there's millions of them out there. Whereas if you roll your own or do something that's not as popular, you might have a tougher time finding help.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's not really a lot of choices for just a non-web developer, or even someone like I dabble in web app pen testing, and I know a lot of web app languages. I don't think I could build one start to finish with some good functionality. So what does that leave you? That leaves you kind of the push button solutions with WordPress or hiring someone, and that gets pretty pricey as well.
Hey, look, I built an application based on Python Flask, and I've been managing the React framework. Yeah, they're not WordPress, but you still got a lot of the same challenges. You still got a lot of, you can make the same mistakes, and it's equal amount, and that's why I think people turn to WordPress, because the ecosystem is so large, right? So like I said, get developers, you can get security plugins, you can get functionality, you can get themes,
and you can get somebody to do that shit for you.
And right, you can hire someone.
Yeah.
Some Android banking malware that's actually pretty cool.
You
Again,
guys always pick the one story that I had in there that I thought was interesting that I didn't delve into.
There's nothing really super new about it. It's the old is it Brada?
Yeah.
The old Brazilian malware, the Android rat. Apparently, it's got some upgrades with some new communication channels, some GPS tracking, and a wiper. It'll wipe it'll factory reset the Android phone after a wire transfer attempt. And so it's just covering its track. But it's using WebSockets protocol to keep live connections alive and monitoring the banking apps on your phone as they're being used.
And why not?
That's pretty cool. The phone is one of the few places that I typically keep very clean and have a high level of trust with for applications like banking apps, because for whatever reason, banks tend to put a lot more effort, or they outsource to much better third parties to develop their banking apps than they seem to do for their websites.
Yeah.
I wanted to delve into a little bit of the Uefi or Uefi bugs, and there was two stories that I had in that I think equally as scary. Perhaps.
Man, we should get, I was actually talking to Scott today. We should get Scott back on from Eclipsium. They're dealing with this very, very heavily, and some things they won't be able to talk about, but
they must be excited. I hate to say that, and it's such an I told you so moment. I also find it's interesting that troubleshooting some PC stuff here, right? Updating and configuring your Uefi BIOS is something that we're all probably in the same boat in this realm. You only look at that stuff and update that stuff when there's non-security problems that arise. I'm having this issue with my PC or Mac or whatever computing device that has, let's limit it to Uefi firmware on it. I'm only going to configure that and update it if I'm having some other issue that's likely not security related, right? I've got driver incompatibility. I've got something that's not working, a device that's not working. I've got, memory that says it's at one speed, but it's not at the other, it's not configured correct, or there's a bug in the BIOS, right? That's auto detecting the speed of my memory. And I should have a 3200, megahertz RAM speed in my DDR4 RAM, but only the operating system is seeing it at 3000 or whatever the case may be. What I've also found, as a side note, when the Uefi firmware says auto detect whatever on my PCIe bus, on my USB bus, on my memory, like the auto stuff doesn't work. I don't know if anyone else has experienced this. If you have, drop in our Discord and share, because my experience is like auto means I'm going to make my best guess and probably get it wrong. It's what auto means inside the BIOS.
Yeah, that's only if you're using all compatible hardware together. You got, your ASUS memory on an ASUS board with an ASUS power supply, and they all have chip integrations at the socket level.
No, I agree. Like, I think you buy 3200. Am I getting the measurement right? That's
for DDR4.
Is it mega? Is it megahertz?
DDR4?
Is it mega?
No.
3200 megahertz.
Is it megahertz?
Is it megahertz? Now we all sound silly.
It's megahertz.
It's megahertz.
I haven't said a word. I don't sound silly at all.
Yeah, 3200. For the record, Larry's not weighing in on this. 3200 megahertz, right? Or hertz, or gigahertz.
Does it megahertz, baby?
3200 is 3200 if you're referencing, because there was the old DDR 3200, which was 3200 megahertz, and there was the DDR4 3200, which references a different speed. It is the class of memory or whatever they.
Right. It's the memory. It's the memory speed.
Speed. Yeah.
What I find is you got to set it to a low value to get the system to boot, and then you slowly increment that. Like regardless of what speed you bought, you got to slowly increment that, match that with what your max is on your motherboard, and kind of like just keep incrementing it until the system doesn't boot. Then reset your BIOS settings and go back to the previous speed setting, and that's what works.
And each memory, if you're going to do it manually, each memory, when you buy your memory, it has your CLS and your clock settings, and so you match that to the memory spec that you bought for the board and the power you're providing to that memory. If you're going to overclock it, then you can mess with your
You can
timing.
overclock. Yeah, you can. I have not.
You do want to do that lower.
With memory speeds where they are, I haven't seen the need to really overclock it.
You know what? This seems like a whole lot of work. I'm just going to get a Dell.
I mean,
Dell, I'm going to hit you. I'm going to freaking hit you.
Dell makes some great laptops, but I mean, there are some great companies out there that do make pre-built PCs that go through all this work, for you. I mean, I know you're making a funny laugh, but like
exactly,
like System 76 does a great job of shipping you compatible hardware that runs Linux, and I think people will kind of balk at the price, but I think built into that price are super smart engineers that have spent a fuckload of time making sure all that crap works together, right? If you want to take on that work yourself, I think you should, because you're going to learn a bunch of stuff, right? And it's going to cost you less in upfront cost, but you're going to spend some time, like we have, building our own PCs, getting all that stuff to operate together. And sometimes maybe it doesn't, which means you need to go buy a new RAM, a new M.2 or whatever that is compatible with your build, and you got to factor that into your cost as well. Joff has joined us. Joff, welcome.
Hello.
What's going on, man? Hey, we're trying to talk about Uefi firmware vulnerabilities, but we're kind of off on this tangent. We went way off on a tangent. So
that actually happens, and
it does.
I was supposed to be here earlier, but I was listening to this awesome, and I got to say this, audiobook. I've become an audiobook fan.
Is it a documentary on marijuana?
It is not,
because all audiobooks should be listened to that. Yeah.
It's actually a book called Sandworm.
Love Sandworm, dude.
Yeah.
Tyler's like, I was there.
Yes. So I was really enjoying it, but then I fell asleep in my chair. So I'm sorry. I'm here now.
Oh, Larry, you got to try some of these Darth Vader ice cubes, by the way.
Oh, hell yeah.
So it's in like this silicone sleeve. I'll just leave it at that.
I've heard that about you.
Yeah. But they're
don't
actually
spoil Sandworm for me. My daughter gave it to me for Christmas. I haven't read it yet.
They're actually Darth Vader's face.
Yeah. So Lee, I joined the ranks of Audible listeners, and I'm a big and cheers everybody, by the way. I'm a big fan of audiobooks these days because readings.
Joff, you finally come to the light, my friend.
I have. I finally come to
I
the
think
light.
I currently have 18 credits. I need to get some books going on there. But
Oh yeah, dude, get on that. Oh, so but before we get into
I love that
UEFI
he's
actual
drinking
vulnerabilities,
Basil
let's talk about something that is related to the audiobook listening that I did of all these hacker books that I've listened to. There is a journalist who, where is this in my stories? There's a journalist who tracked down Susan Thunder.
yeah, this is a good one.
Oh, I heard about this.
Yeah.
Susie Thunder.
Notorious hacker back in the 80s. Her real name is Susan Headley. And if you listen to a lot of the kind of old school hacker books that talk about Kevin Mitnick specifically, there's a lot of books that are about like Kevin's story, right? Like Takedown and things of that nature. There's other books that kind of chronicle his hacking activities in different time frames, right? Some are more about his early stuff, some about his later stuff, some are about stuff that he was hacking, that German hackers were hacking, and tie some of those stories together. So in reading a lot of those works, you'll likely find works that introduce this character called Susan Thunder. And she was friends with, in the time when Kevin was hacking with the character Roscoe, right, out in California. She was involved in that kind of scene.
She was Roscoe's girlfriend.
Exactly. And there's like variations on this story. In all, like, I read this article, I think in a different, like, from the perspective of someone who has read the other works and heard all the other sides, right? Because I think I don't put words in anyone's mouth, but like some will say like she really wasn't that skilled at hacking as she claims to be. Others,
she was allegedly a social engineer.
Others will say like she was Roscoe's girlfriend, but really wanted to date. Like there's all kinds of speculation and like who knows? I think you got to read all the works and draw your own conclusions. But this journalist Claire Evans, mad props to Claire. She spent a year tracking down Susan Thunder. Now, Claire, I'm with you on this one because I read all of the historical works about the story, and I'm like, I wonder what she's up to today. Like, she did a lot of phone freaking, social engineering, some hacking back in the day, went on like mainstream news and did interviews, and then like no one ever heard from her again. Like, she conceivably dropped off the face of the planet.
She's a shaman.
Yeah, Claire spent a year tracking her down and ended up doing a series of phone interviews with Susan about, what happened in the past, and a little bit like I was more interested in like, what is she doing now? Like, turns out she's married with kids, like living a seemingly normal life. Right?
Midwest housewife with 2 kids and picket fence and
she was formerly a dominatrix in California. Was one of her jobs to
come
make
on,
money.
who isn't?
And a professional groupie and
she spent a lot of time with famous musicians.
Yep, allegedly, and that's the best part that comes out of the end of the article was like, by the time I was done interviewing Susie Thunder, I realized that I'm talking to someone who was a professional social engineer or was a social engineer by trade, and I don't now know what was true and what wasn't.
Sure.
Because there was some pretty outlandish stuff that she told, and you couldn't tell whether or not it was...
Yeah, because there was the hack.
Yeah. That was pretty...
The hack that got some people, like Kevin and Roscoe, in trouble.
Yep, it was the... Hey, you got access to the system. I want to learn about it. And they explored for a while from her computer.
And some say it was her that actually did the hack.
He was driving. She was watching. Hey, and then he went to leave for the evening. And she said, hey, can I check this out later? And he gave the phone number, but she went to dial up and it was burned to the ground type of thing.
Right. Yeah. It's an article you should read.
Absolutely.
Right? Because it's interesting from a lot of different perspectives. So, and great. I mean, Claire, fantastic journalism. Like, I've often wondered, like, what if we were to kind of go dig up some of these hackers from the past and get their story? And she did. So, it's a lot of respect.
Yep. Absolutely.
Definitely go read my story number 12.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Good stuff.
All right, so back to UEFI. So Kaspersky finds Moon Bounce, which is UEFI malware that embeds itself in the UEFI firmware. The the thing from this article that I thought was scary. They said while previous Uefi firmware compromises, LoJax and Mosaic Regressor manifest as additions of the DXE drivers to the overall firmware image on the spy flash. Let that process. The current case exhibits a much more subtle and stealthy technique where an existing firmware component is modified to alter its behavior. So it's almost like more stealthy insertion into the boot process than previous attempts.
It's way stealthier. So it's using a set of pointer routines that there's callable pointer routines as part of the core DXE image and that boot process that starts. There's driver hooks and functions that get called and loaded. So the service table where these pointers are pointing have things like create event, or there's a boot exit service or something like that. They're able to append the malicious code into these pointer references and have it load up into Windows as part of the kind of the multi-staged hook as it's being called into the user mode process. As you're spawning Windows, right, you have to build certain user functions, and they're able to inject this into the SVC host process, which is very interesting because of its network capabilities, and make a call out to other command and control servers. And from there, then they can stage their shell code and inject that into memory. And there's a bunch of cool stuff that they're doing where they're loading additional shell code directly from a different C++ loader that has its own algorithm, and those are all encrypted blobs, and then loads another set of system DLLs or patches another function set within inside of a system DLL that exists on these Windows boxes, and so they get an additional point of entry after the initial loader happens. So it's very, very stealthy and very
But there's a lot of different stages and loaders here, right? Because when you think about compromising just the operating system, there's different stages and loaders. But in this scenario, kind of the higher level of what I'm hearing you describe, Tyler, is there's stagers and loaders that end up in EFI that then trigger different stagers and loaders that end up in the operating system, and all of that is memory resident in this particular case.
Correct.
In the operating
the driver, yes, in the operating system as it's getting loaded. Yeah, the DXE driver set that they're able to hook into and patch those pointers becomes very interesting because of it's common and prevalent on almost all UEFI.
It makes me wonder. I don't think the Kaspersky article really knew how the initial infection happened into the Uefi system. Are they like in software inserting themselves and then writing to the EFI partition, or are they just like writing their stuff into the EFI partition directly? Because Uefi is software, but a lot of it is stored on that special partition on your hard drive called the EFI partition.
Correct, and that's usually from a mistake in the way the vendor chose to write the UEFI or a particular binary version of that BIOS. Mm-hmm. They could have gotten a write or a write execute bit wrong, or a memory address location has an overflow or a vulnerability where that they have architected that UEFI file system, and there's a vulnerability in that allows them to write code or overload code to certain locations.
Yeah, and we're talking about writing to two different areas. The EFI partition stored in your storage device, but there's also writable space on the motherboard for UEFI to live as well.
It's more of a yes and no. It's more of a run space. There's also backup images. There's image files that get called from that space that initiate UEFI that lives on your hard drive. So those core functions live in different locations.
Right. Because you can update your Uefi BIOS, and that gets written onto the chip on your motherboard. And there's also components that get written to your storage device as well, to your boot device.
There are also, you have to remember, there's network stacks within inside of UEFI.
Correct.
Capabilities. You can live firmware patch, or you can load backup images to the UEFI and or boot off of secondary images. So, and you're starting to think about, like, why is secure boot and boot integrity via a TPM so critical and so important? Like, these are the things that we're trying to advance to, which is why Windows 11 has pushed so hard for some of these precursors in order to ensure the integrity of what you're booting and how you're configuring those boots.
It's craziness, man. I also updated firmware on the storage device itself today. So Samsung has that Magician software, and while the operating system is running on that storage device, it will update the firmware. Does it have hooks to halt all write operations while it's updating the firmware? Like, that was really crazy today too.
That's unlikely. Yeah. I mean, it's probably a swap. You know, you can update the firmware, but then it chooses the time to make the image
like
swap.
A switch, right? Like it. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, there's definitely a bunch of implications around the APT groups that are involved in this particular malware. They're very classic kind of TTPs with inside of there, some of the code reusage, very strategically targeting, we'll say, Eastern Bloc Russia. And, maybe the Chinese are trying to get some insight into what Russia's doing at this point. And this was an operation down that path. I don't know.
Yeah, because then my story number 18 is a different set of vulnerabilities in Uefi firmware that affect 25 vendors. And the root cause of that problem was reference code within the Inside H2O firmware framework code, which turns out to be an SDK that all of these vendors chose to adopt, and the vulnerabilities in that SDK. So this is like even way more of a classic kind of supply chain issue, is that I'm creating Uefi firmware, and across 25 different vendors, we're all using the same SDK. Guess what? That SDK has a vulnerability that allows insertion into the Uefi BIOS stuff.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's part of the system management mode, which is what controls most of the hardware within UEFI. So very interesting. I mean, we've been looking at and talking about you had the Dell software that interacts with UEFI and can, boot up stuff, configure remote access over the network into those hardware level things. There's things like SGX from Intel. That's an SPI or a chip that allows modification of hardware or pre-boot configuration. So remote access over a chip that you don't even really control from what you're actually looking at. So there's some scary things.
There's like computers inside my computer, man.
Inside of the chip.
This just kind of freaks me out, right? I mean, whoever thought it was a good idea for the active operating system to have access to BIOS firmware?
Oh, it's for updates, man. It's for updates, man. Not just security, but for features, man. You got to put features on the computer inside my computer.
If I don't have a GUI on the BIOS that can overclock it and turn my toaster on, what the hell is the point?
Yeah, I'm going to invoke Lee here. I mean, who remembers, right? There was
multiple days. There was years in a period in the past.
There was much. Right. There was a day when you had to, grab a list of hexadecimal codes and key it in to actually kick off the boot of a mainframe or a mini computer, right?
Greatly?
I mean,
yep.
Sorry, I had to.
Yeah, I remember that.
I'm going to say it all started with the EEPC, right? Like, you guys remember those EEPCs you could load Kali onto? Or it actually wasn't even Kali, it was Backtrack back then.
Yep, I actually just recycled a couple of those a couple months ago.
Yeah, so back then, you remember they had that secondary hardware chip operating system that you could boot from the BIOS that allowed you into it was basically a web browser or a web only that provided the BIOS a network stack and gave you a web browser, right? Like, just from the BIOS. Like, that was the first time I remember seeing a network stack provided to BIOS level operating on a chip.
And that was the beginning of the end, man. I mean, seriously. Come on. It's a bad idea.
It's all for functionality. Yep. I mean, I thought you were going to go back to the time, Joff, after the time you talked about where you had to have a floppy disk and you had to boot on it. And then from that floppy disk, you could update your BIOS. But there was no other way to update the BIOS.
I remember those days.
Well, but that's the right way to do things, right? But, ultimately, we went from there to interfaces that were dedicated and separate for out of band, and now we've just put it all in band. Mm-hmm. And when you put it all in band, bad shit is going to happen. I mean, come on.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, it still exists today. I mean, I've had to take the USB drive, you put that in a very specific USB port on the motherboard, and you push the button like while you boot, like there's differences in different motherboard manufacturers.
Wait, say that again.
So you take a USB drive, you got to put it in a specific USB port on the motherboard. Then you have to hold a little button on the motherboard as it boots up.
A button.
That's still a thing. That's the new ASUS port. I'll have that. That's
power it on, and it triggers something inside the motherboard, right? Just like the reset button on your Linksys router, triggers something in the motherboard to go, oh, I need to read from this USB device plugged into that port and copy over a specific file that is named in a specific file name and copy that, and that's my BIOS update.
Right.
So here is Josh. Here is Josh making fun of you for saying "button" when he comes from the land of Rita's water ice.
Hey, Rita's water ice is amazing.
No. It's water ice. Get it right. It's not water ice. It's water ice.
Excuse me, sir. Would you like some Rita's water ice?
What are you thinking?
Or would you prefer some water ice?
Water.
Dude.
Water ice. Water.
Do you open the drawer and have some coffee?
No.
I think this may be the next iteration of physical attack, though. Coming back.
Water?
I mean, it could be,
there still is the BIOS. Like, you still have that USB port. You can still flash a BIOS with the buttons on a lot of the nice gaming motherboards. That's still a thing for different BIOSes and overclocking. But I think at some point, like, we're going to start seeing, like, whether it's through SGX, whether it's through IPMI or baseband management. vPro, yep. You're going to have these persistence and attacks where you're getting your stagers and loaders into the BIOS, and that is where a good portion of what attackers are doing. And that's
it's that. So we're gonna you'll hear us talk about vPro a lot more coming up, because vPro is actually really cool technology. I've been briefed on it recently. And Joff, to your point, right? It's the usability versus security. So I want to use vPro so that I can ensure my computers are on so they can receive updates. And I can do that without having to interact with the user. I do that through vPro. And that's a benefit to me because I can make sure all the computers are on and receive those updates. But the security side of that is I've just enabled this functionality. So it's always a trade-off.
Well, it's actually deeper than that, right? It's ultimately what we're seeing in the industry is the abstraction, right, of the physical layer from human visibility, period. I mean, you look at the cloud trend, that's exactly what's happening. We don't see the physical layer of compute anymore. It's completely abstracted, which means it necessitates that the control plane of the lower level firmware functions become accessible across a network.
It's all just a series of zeros and ones, man.
That doesn't even take into the account hypervisors and clouds and what your Kubernetes cluster and Azure AD is running on bare metal. That also could be
that's my point. The entire control plane across the entirety of the stack, firmware all the way up, has become something that is accessible across networks because of the abstraction of hardware from human hands, right? That's what's going on here. And you talk about opening up massive attack surfaces. We're only just starting to touch the surface of this. I mean, it's huge.
We have to off, right? Like, there's no other way to scale at the way in which we're scaling with cloud, with data centers, with SaaS applications, and the availability of on-demand, compute power and distributed resources that are always available on the fly for a company inside of a company inside of a platform, right? Like all of those things have to be manageable at scale remotely.
I'm not questioning the operational necessity. What I'm questioning is the lunacy of of essentially the industrial control approach of just throw it on the network. Fuck it, right? I mean, it's just, oh my god. Okay.
Job security, buddy.
I mean, we throw Samba on the network, and that's always been a bad idea.
Oh man, not bad.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you could say you left your fruit dangling out there.
What kind of fruit?
Fruit that enables compatibility with Apple NetTalk. No,
yeah,
what is? Wait,
I was going to say that the only answer to Larry's question,
AFP and NetTalk. Was NetTalk Apple?
NetAtalk, yeah, that was Apple.
That was Apple,
right? The only answer to Larry's question,
yes,
though, is when you say what kind of fruit, it's always low-hanging fruit, baby.
Is that like a kumquat? Would it be a kumquat or an avocado? Maybe.
As usual, Paul, you're leading us in completely different directions.
Is kumquat's a fruit though? That's a fruit. Right? Is tomato a fruit or a vegetable? Never mind. In any case,
knowledge is knowing that tomato is fruit.
Yes.
Wisdom is knowing that tomato should not go in fruit salad.
Yes, agreed.
How true. How true.
And fruit shouldn't go in regular salad. I hate it when they put apples in my salad. I really did.
I've completely forgotten what we were talking about.
We're talking about Samba. It's because the configuration parameter in Samba that I believe is enabled by default is they called it fruit, probably in reference obviously to Apple, right? Yeah. Fruit. To enable that NetAtalk compatibility, so that basically Apple macOS computers can use file sharing that is provided by Samba, and it is in this portion of the code that there is vulnerabilities. However, you, as a remote attacker, you need access to a remote file handle in order to exploit this vulnerability. It's hard to say exactly how this is going to play out in an exploit because I haven't been able to look at exploit code yet. I've only been able to look at what has been published on this from news outlets and from Samba itself. Do they show the vulnerable code blocks? I don't think.
Yeah, kind of. They show the fruit : resource equals the file. That's a local file handle to where the Samba D service is running, right, or the SMB D service. I'm not understanding how that would actually affect why you'd have to have the access to the file handle for that SMB. It's
the file resource. It's the file metadata.
Oh, you're right. Yep, you're right, Lee.
So it's my 10 and 11 story, and one of them is I've got the link in number 10 to the Samba. Not a pretty article, but it goes into the details of the issue, but not necessarily the exploit.
Which story is that?
Lee's number 10.
My number 10 has the Samba, the article off of samba.org. Like I said, it ain't pretty.
The remote code execution with root privileges. I mean, with all of the stuff in Linux already, like this is just another. This one's bad when POC code gets out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can throw shellcode on the heap if you access metadata with the remote file handle. That's basically what's going on.
Right, but you need access to a remote file handle, which I think means you need guest access enabled. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's probably sufficient. That's probably sufficient. I bet there's plenty of them out there.
That's sufficient?
That are deployed.
I mean, so Mac OS turns on the guest all the time randomly, so that's fine.
You just ask Tyler how he knows this.
So that's fine, Tyler. You can barely stop smiling, you bastard.
They just need
that's
right
interesting.
access.
Is Mac OS vulnerable? Because does it enable Samba, or do you have to install it as a third party?
You would have to install it as a file service, right? I mean, client-sided, though.
I mean, not natively.
Is it natively? Is it natively?
Yeah.
I think it's native.
It's native, but you have to go and enable into the file sharing settings and so forth.
I got you.
It's in
so I'm wondering if Apple has to come out with a patch for that.
No. This is a Samba patch.
Okay, so it's just Samba, not the SMB file sharing that Apple built, which is likely not based on Samba. Right. I got you.
Right. And if you've got the Fruit VSF module because you got Mac clients, you got to update. Fortunately, the patch is out. Or you can turn off the VFS, Lee, right? But that might break compatibility with Apple. Basically, Mac thinks shit's gone. Mm-hmm. It's like it's not really a workaround. But
I'm curious to see when an exploit comes out for this one.
I was gonna say, I mean, like out of sight, out of mind, right? I mean, it's gone. It's gone. Mm-hmm. I'm just full of shit. Sorry.
We knew that, Job. It's okay.
Sorry, not sorry.
I thought.
What are you?
Go ahead.
Just speaking of vulnerabilities, right? Like, so what if we had a crowdsourced, government-funded vulnerability scanner? I feel like this isn't the first time we've talked about this either.
Wait, say it again?
There happens to be one right across the pond.
I'm trying to sequence those words in my head.
Yeah, so it's crowdsourced. So, like, as long as you submit your Nmap NSE script in a certain parameters and requirements, the UK government is funding a project, which is where I get government funded from, incorporating this into a government-funded vulnerability scanner. It's the SME project. Was created for both governments and public sector to create or review scripts that can be used to scan internal networks, and approved scripts will be made available via the NCSC's SME GitHub project page.
I'm going to say something totally horrible, but now that Renaud Duraison is stepping down at Tenable, isn't that what Tenable's going to become?
A government-funded
crowdsourced vulnerability scanner?
No, I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding.
I still classify them as a commercial vulnerability scanner, even though Renault is not there.
Yeah, no, it was totally the joke to.
If the UK government wants to hire Renault to spearhead this project, I would be so excited about it. That would be a great idea.
Coincidence?
Yeah, right.
But no, that was more of a joke to get out the.
No,
Renault's leaving Tenable.
I commented on Renault's LinkedIn post. Renault is one of the most amazing people to work with, one of the smartest people that I've ever worked with, for sure.
He's been at Tenable
over 20 years. He created Nessus when he was 18. Tenable was created like I don't remember the exact time frame, not too long
afterwards.
After that, when he created Tenable after Ron had the exit from Dragon and incorporated Jack Hufford, they created Tenable network security at the time. And so he's been doing that. I mean, he's been doing Nessus since he was 18 years old. And I think as we were talking about our call earlier today, like he's like Larry and I, like our age, right?
Yeah.
So he's been doing it a long time.
20 plus years.
Yeah. And so he's like, the team's doing their thing. And I don't blame him. Like, maybe he wants to go off and do different things. And I've personally worked with Renault for quite a number of years.
Yeah.
He's just an amazingly brilliant person. So I hope he goes on to do something. Like, I respect him if he wants to go sail around the world with his family. I totally get that, and I will respect whatever decision you have. But like, I champion. Like, I hope that a lot of us or a lot of folks that I recognize in the industry, like Renault, that have made such great contributions, that they continue to contribute to the security community, right? Like Mutz, isn't associated with the offensive security stuff anymore, but like I totally respect like whatever he's doing now. Like that's cool. But I wish that those kind of folks, like Robert Morris, falls in that category for me. And like understanding more of his backstory, like I get it, dude. Like you want to distance yourself from it, right? So folks like Renault and others that I mentioned, I really want them to continue their contributions to our community and be involved in the security community.
And we also totally get that you're going to go take a couple of years and go sail around the world.
If you want to go sail around the world, be with your family, I respect that.
Look
too.
at Marty Rash.
Yeah,
like sold source for Cisco.
But he came back. He did some sailing for a while and came back.
Yeah, exactly. You know, he did his thing. He's back. He's kicking ass and taking names again.
Can I ask my question now?
Yes.
And it's really simple. There's a word in there that is the following: approved. Well, who's doing the approving?
Oh, back to the story. Agreed. Right.
Yeah.
That's
it. Right?
So I can attest, Joff, the process that you have to go through, the testing you have to go through to make sure that a vulnerability check is accurate, that it performs well, it's exhausting. It's exhausting.
It is.
It requires creativity, a huge amount of engineering, and a very well-defined process to test that stuff to make sure that in any environment and configuration, it's going to identify a vulnerability accurately. I worked at Tenable for the better part of 7 years. I can tell you that process is
to not hurt anything else.
Yes. Yeah, and it doesn't crash stuff. Thank you, Josh. Yeah.
You're welcome.
I knew I was missing something there. It doesn't crash
it's
shit.
It's a little detail.
Little detail.
Paul, come on.
You don't want to crash anything, right?
It's a huge undertaking.
Huge undertaking. Which is why there's 3 extremely successful and publicly traded vulnerability scanning companies. There's also a handful of other vulnerability scanning companies that are doing an amazing job, and their line item for cost for research and development is huge. And that's why, because it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So
non-trivial process.
One of the things the NCSC said about these scripts is you better take a look and understand how it checks, whether it's intrusive or not, where false positives and false negatives come from. That's part of the research that those commercial entities are doing for you, is to really identify how the script can go wrong and what you need to understand. So these are going to be, good scripts, but you better understand what they do. Don't just click run.
And to come up with really great checks, you need some brilliant engineers. That was my point with Renault. Brilliant engineer.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
That's what he did for the better part of 20 years. So I don't know. I mean, I hope we can get to the point where we can have a crowdsourced, function for this. But it's hard, man. It's hard. I think they're going to have some challenges with this program. I give them a lot of credit for trying. I do.
It's a great idea to a certain extent, but you've got a big problem with that. What if bad actors inject themselves in the process and start sabotaging some of these things? Or they say, oh, look, this is a great way for me to check that nobody's found my stuff that's out there, my 0 day. I mean, I could totally see Tyler doing that. I mean, some bad black hat guy.
I can tell you the stuff that's out there for open source NSE scripts that check for vulnerabilities is not very accurate. I've tested that stuff personally in a lab. It is not terribly accurate. A lot of it is relying on just banner checking, right? And when you get into just banner checking, every Linux distribution, as an example, manipulates those banners, and instantly you run into a huge problem, which is why when you do vulnerability, air quote, scanning, you tend to go to locally scanning. So, okay, I scanned an Ubuntu system remotely, and I think it's vulnerable to this stuff. But even better, if I can log into that Ubuntu system and tell you if your packages are out of date, that's 1,000 times more accurate than me scanning it remotely. And those are some of the challenges with vulnerability management.
Yeah, I mean, this segues into the stuff that Alan Friedman talks about all the time, the software bill of materials. There's actually an effort going on with the SPDX project under the Linux Foundation to do VEX, which vulnerability examination, I think. I could be wrong. But it's basically to link vulnerabilities to specific packages. Because how many times tonight have we talked about this is in the tech segment, this is a vulnerable version of Policy Kit, this is a vulnerable version of this, and so on and so on and so on. And it's really a problem. I mean, I'm involved in that to a certain extent. And one of the biggest issues is, how do you identify a specific piece of software? Oh, well, there's a version number. How many people have forked it? How many people have doing
right?
And so just identifying the like you said, banner grabbing, identifying just the packages that are on board, it's actually harder than it looks.
Yeah.
Much less actually checking them.
I almost think that the identifying the version number is so flawed that you need to identify the actual vulnerability. But then we get into static code analysis. Like, get down to the actual vulnerability, not the version number of the package. But that gets hard.
Well, you can hash. You can say, okay, this specific chunk of code is vulnerable to this. Hash that chunk of code. And if you run across that hash,
you got to identify that chunk of code. What if it's forked and that chunk of code's in a different spot and it doesn't have? There's a lot of. It's a hard problem. There was an article I kind of skimmed across where like we have this problem and like no one's got a really great solution to it. And I talked to a lot of SCA vendors, specifically looking at open source. And the question I have for all of them is, look, as a developer, I'm going to put my developer hat on. There are solutions that have told me.
I'd actually prefer if you put your developer pants on.
Yeah, sorry. I don't often put those on.
I know. It's actually more taking them off.
I hack naked, at least without pants. But when I do develop code and a solution tells me, hey, you've got a vulnerable library in your software stack. I'm like, okay. I'm like, where's that vulnerability? Oh, it's in this method or function.
But I don't use that method or function.
Exactly. So I'm like, okay, I don't need to fix that like right now. Now, conceivably, I should fix that because maybe I'm not the only developer on that project. Another developer does actually call that method, and now I am vulnerable, and I get that.
And or arguably, if I don't fix it now, it will be something I don't get to for a while.
And then I
use it.
Yeah, I write code. I'm like,
I forget about
need that method or function, and I call it. So it's a really tough problem. It is. And there are open source different solutions at different price points that attempt to solve that problem. And I mean, they're all doing a great job conceivably. But it is difficult. Some of the more commercial solutions really go deep into that problem, which I like in that, they kind of tell me like how much work it is for me to upgrade, right? Like, hey, you can squash this bug if you go from Tomcat 3.1 to 3.2, right? You squash this level of bugs. You really want to get to version 5. But when you go to version 5 of Tomcat, that means you're going to have to change all this code, and it's that much work. And it was Synopsys that actually does a pretty good job of telling the developer like incrementally how much work that is. Because, I mean, all of us have developed code in some way and get that problem in that, how much work it is it for me to go to the latest version? And do I need to go from 3.1 to 3.2 or from 3.1 to 5.0? And how much work is that? So, it's going to be a problem for a while, in my assessment. There was another one that I wanted to segue. Was there a segue from that one, or do we want to go in a completely different direction? Let's go in a completely different direction and talk about
Olympics.
Oh no, there was. We talked about fingerprinting briefly, and I was gonna go to Larry. You had the story too. Your GPU. So, like, the way I read this is Larry, Tyler, and I can all have the same exact GPU in our computers. However, it can fingerprint differently on all three of our computers, and therefore, individually fingerprint us as individuals. Was the research paper, which is crazy to think about.
When they say fingerprint, though, what do they mean by that? Like, they can tell that we were different entities, or they can tell our computer names or IP or location?
I think Tyler, different entities.
Not that Paul's Paul and Larry's. Larry necessarily.
Right. Yep.
But Paul's machine's different from Larry's machine. And maybe through other mechanisms determine that Paul's Paul and Larry's Larry, right? But it's kind of
maybe if you're both coming from the same IP address, you can tell which machine is accessing a certain resource for targeting.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep,
absolutely. Yeah, Tyler, I was having some conversation with some folks the other day, and it comes down to like all of the different quote metadata that you can gather from some of this type of stuff that is different about all of these types of things. Like I remember talking a while back about some of the power companies that could interact with your power meter to determine the level of power that you were consuming, where they could tell what television show you were watching and at what scene by the amount of power draw that your LED TV or your flat panel TV was consuming to project that image onto the screen.
Even with other devices that are drawing different amounts of power at different times?
Yep, because they could determine, they could fingerprint those individually.
Interesting.
And they could offset those at those individual times. Like, let's say your dishwasher was running at the same time, but if you ran the dishwasher when you weren't home and there were little other things going on, they could fingerprint your dishwasher and they could diff your dishwasher from your TV.
I mean, with machine learning and stuff like that, I can.
That's kind of interesting because, it's. I've actually looked into some of this at home, then looking at Current Draw, and there is some frequency disturbance that happens depending on the device. Like electrical motors actually produce a different frequency variance with their current draw than do transformers. And I think that's essentially what Larry's talking about, because when you look at a television or you look at almost any device that's non-electric motor in your house, they use a transformer and they convert to a DC current. And computers are very similar to TVs in that they're transforming AC to DC current, usually 12, 24 volts. But to actually be able to fingerprint and tell the different current draw through that transformer, that's an interesting trick, because that's getting down to really subtle pieces.
There were some consumer devices that could help you monitor your power consumption. And I think now I'm wondering, like, why isn't the power company making that data available to me?
Like, what was it?
I can see us nerds. Yeah, I can see us nerds. Yeah, I can see us nerds being really interested in that. And maybe outside of our, if they were able to make it usable enough to produce a report for consumers, and Java, I think, is where you're going at. Some power companies do this, right? To say, like, hey, here's all the devices in your home, and like these ones are drawing way more power. And you may be like, oh, I didn't mean for that to draw that much power. Because the power company still today is one of those weird business models where they want you to consume less off the grid, especially in today's day and age with electric cars and cryptocurrency mining. They want you to do less. And I'm happy to do less and pay less, but I need the report that tells me what devices in my home are drawing what.
Yep. Well, so yeah, I mean, some of that was originally like the kilowatt devices, and they've gotten way. Yeah,
there's some. I've seen them advertised on Facebook with know.
They've gotten way better. Well, I mean, I interacted with some.
I'm using one. I'm using one. You can there's current draw devices that you can put around the two-phase feeds in your house. Right, they're basically magnetic sensors.
It's an amp clamp, effectively.
Yeah. It is, and I've got that on my house, and I'm actually.
Do you have to wire that into your house, Joff, or do you clamp that on the wire?
No, you can because it's an induction style device. You can just put it around the main wire, right?
Yeah, so it's not. So an amp clamp is effectively some coils that it literally opens up like a pair of pliers, and then closes, and it's got just a circle.
Yep. Okay.
And it's in magnetic resonance to determine how much energy is flowing through.
I got you.
And side note, this is how you find out the first day you plug your Tesla in to charge that it draws 12,000 fucking watts, right?
110 or 220, Joff?
Yeah, that's at 220.
So supercharger, right? Yeah.
Yep. It's the green solution, baby. As long as you have the electricity to feed it.
Folks have told me that it, in the grand scheme of things, it uses less energy than fossil fuels.
Probably true, right? It depends on how the electricity is generated, right? The whole thing, you've got to look at the total cost of ownership, right? In terms of environmental cost.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Does that count the battery production and disposal and waste?
That's my point. Right.
Yeah, and Tyler, I think the variables there that varies by manufacturer of the battery, right? And that there's a lot of variables in there. Some are probably better than others, in I would guess.
Right. So I mean, this is a tangent, but Elon's going for the 500,000-mile battery or so, right? And he's claiming that even current batteries like what I've got are probably good for 200,000-300,000 miles at least. That's pretty decent, right? That's a lot of charge-discharge cycles, but once you reach that number and your battery's, more or less useless, that's not a small upgrade. And it's not a small. We're talking about a 75,000 watt hour battery.
Yeah,
this is not a small battery bank.
And but looking into this as well, the folks that work on these vehicles, it's extremely hazardous.
Yep.
You get jolted by that, you can die.
You can't.
You
no.
will. Let me rephrase that.
You will
die.
You will die.
Yeah.
There's no can. There is will.
You will die.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's and there's tons of safety features built around these batteries.
Sure.
And, I watch a bunch of these YouTube channels and stuff, like Rich Rebuilds and a bunch of other folks that, that are hacking their Teslas and they're rebuilding Teslas from the junkyard, and like the battery shit is crazy.
Yeah, you got to be super careful.
Like there was one that
even in my Segway stuff, I'm super careful with the battery because that's a pretty big charge. If I get jolted by that, it could suck.
Yeah, you could kill yourself with a car battery, the 12-volt car battery. It's not the voltage; it's the amperage.
It's the amperage. Yeah, it's amps.
It's the amperage. Yeah.
Car battery is a different animal in that. I mean, yes, it's dangerous, but it's designed to deliver that 10 seconds of ultimate hit.
Yep. Unless it's a deep cycle marine battery, and then it's a different story altogether.
Right.
It's a lower, slower kind of.
Just more amps for a little bit longer time.
I gotcha. I want to talk about the FBI urging temporary phones for Olympic athletes.
Yep.
Interesting.
Burner phones.
It was interesting. I use YouTube TV, and I went in there, and it was like, "Hey, the Olympics are coming up. Like, what games do you want us to record?" I'm like,
all of them.
Yeah, I'm like, that's a really cool feature. I was like, turning to my wife, I'm like, hey, like which ones we want to watch, right? We recorded a few of them, so
this is we were having this discussion before the show. This is why we have 3 DVRs for Olympic season.
Yeah,
because we record all of them.
Yeah, absolutely, because they're on at weird times and stuff.
And then we spend the next 3 months watching them.
Sure. But so obviously, now think about all these the most elite athletes in the world, all going to China, and we all know about China's policies on spying and all that stuff. Of course, China's like, oh, we're not going to spy on anyone when they're probably spying on everyone.
Yeah, right.
And so the FBI is urging that U.S. Olympic athletes specifically use temporary phones, and I'm like, this is bad advice. I'm going to say this is bad advice just on this particular angle, because the problem is we've talked about this as like burner laptops and burner phones when you go to security conferences.
Yep.
So you're going to take you got your regular device, right? Like I got my laptop, I got my phone, and then I'm going to go somewhere to a conceivably hostile environment, like a security conference, like I'm going to China, and I'm going to use a new device. Right. And what's the first thing I'm going to do on my new device? I'm going to
log into all your shit.
I'm going to go, wait, I need access to social media. I need access to Slack and Discord so I can communicate with everyone. I mean, okay, Signal aside, right? I may configure a secure messaging service, and Signal's really good at that. But then I'm like, I need to get access to my email. And I'm going to call out email specifically. I'm going to the Olympics. And from what I've read and understand about the Olympics is it's like a huge event. And I got to imagine that, I get emailed maybe a QR code so that I can get meals and drinks as an athlete, or I get emailed a badge so they can, just like when you go to a sporting event now, no one prints out paper. It's all on your
schedule where you need to be.
Your schedule where you need to be. There's like I think a handful of things that you're like, I need access to my email, so I'm going to put email on my phone. So how is that temporary phone or device any different from the device that you normally use? Okay, maybe you don't have your banking applications.
Yep, you don't have your banking. You don't have all of your drug test results. You don't have your mortgage documents. You don't have scans of your licenses because people do that.
But I need all my passwords, so I got to put LastPass on that device.
But arguably, and I think that it's good advice, but not enough. Like, not only should you have a burner phone, but when you register to get access to all of your stuff for your Olympics, you should be using a burner email address, single purpose email address.
I like that. I like that a lot better.
On one device, and that you're gonna add Instagram so you can post a couple pictures of the stuff and. Yeah,
well, you need multi-factor. You need multi-factor, which is an SMS or a Google Authenticator app.
Yep. So you do
SMS.
So you do.
Yeah,
so you
hopefully not SMS, Lee, like you said. Yeah.
Even if you do, but it's still you're way limiting your attack surface by using just limited services by a burner email address, and you're not getting all of those other things your personal device is normally associated with.
Yeah, I think playing devil's advocate, I think you did a great job.
Is anybody going to listen to this though? Because they want to take pictures. They're at the Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
They're in China.
Yeah.
They have family to communicate. They've got money to deal with. Their devices will be left
and
secure.
why would I go buy another phone, even if it's a cheap one? I mean, why would I do that? Why would I spend that money?
The advice could be like lock down the phone that you have, right? Like maybe when you go there, if you're not going to buy a new device, like maybe remove some of the apps that you use to control your house with. Maybe remove some of the apps you do to your banking.
And then we start talking, no-click exploits.
Yeah.
Then again,
and or they're losing physical access because they're not going to have it while they're
diving in the pool.
The dismount bars.
I was going to diving in the pool. No, this is Winter Olympics. That said, you start talking no-click, and then they've got access to everything. Like. Mm-hmm. I see value in the burner, but I think the advice is incomplete.
I agree.
There's one piece of advice I thought might be useful is, hey, how about taking photos with a camera?
Yeah.
Post. I mean, I see Lee and Tyler's point collectively, right? Like you're an Olympic athlete. When you're at the Olympics, you're going to want to take pictures with folks, and you're going to post that to social media, right? Mm-hmm. Lee, your advice, I get that too. Like, take a camera, take those pictures, and upload them to social media when you get home. But that's not how the world.
These are Gen X.
I know it's not how the world works,
right? I like your suggestion, Lee.
Yeah,
like,
but
capture the moment while, like, before we had phones, we took a damn camera with us, and we took pictures and we uploaded them when we got home.
Yep. Right? But I mean, and that said, still limit your access to what you do
Tyler's
on that phone.
His eyes right
Like, we get it. You use TikTok and you use Instagram. Use them from your burner.
Yeah.
But don't log into Slack and don't log into your banking app and don't do.
I don't think it's about what device you have. I think it's about practicing good OPSEC. Yeah. And if you're good OPSEC, maybe. And I've done this too. Like, all right, I'm going to leave my main phone at home. I'm going to get another phone. I mean, call it your burner phone or whatever. I'm still going to configure a smaller subset of just what I need to go to the event on that phone. I'm still limiting my exposure by leaving my main phone behind. So it doesn't have all my home automation apps on it with all my credentials, for that. So I'm still kind of limiting my I'm using a more hardened device, if you will. I'm limiting my attack surface by bringing a phone that only has access to specific things rather than everything. Or I am taking my main device and I'm going to harden it and maybe remove some shit from that before I go there. I don't know.
Yep.
I also worry about, if you take your main device and somehow it gets jacked up and you start connecting it to things and transferring data all over the place, a separate device, even though you've enabled stuff, you're being more selective. I mean,
it's about being selective. I think it's for most people, they can be more selective on a new device and only enable what they need.
Yep.
So maybe,
exactly.
Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe it's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
I don't know. If China wants your shit, they're gonna get your shit.
Yeah. Yeah. And arguably, maybe these elite athletes aren't necessarily their main target for some of this stuff. I mean, they're probably a target, but they are not. They're not going to drop their unknown no-click on somebody like Michael Phelps. That's not what their target is.
I don't know. Doesn't Michael Phelps go to Nike and record a commercial and connect into the Wi-Fi at?
So they can steal all the new plans for the new Nike sneakers.
No, tinfoil hat, Tyler is strong with you, which I love. I'm not discounting that.
He's not wrong.
He's not wrong. You're not wrong, dude.
He's not wrong.
I don't know if they're a huge they're going to be targeted. Like there's going to be operatives all over. There's Americans there. Like whether they have specific targets or targets of opportunity, like it could be a shotgun approach because everyone's there. It provides a great utilization of some of their tooling that may not be super sophisticated, but it's also.
I think putting it in this light, like I'm upset that we have to burden our elite athletes with this level of security, because I think our elite athletes are mostly younger folks that are going to compete. They shouldn't have to worry about this stuff.
No, they should, because this is the world we live in.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure already, but there's You go to China, like this is
Damn, man, like I think we should help
do.
them. I like, having said that, like I want to help them. Like focus on your where you're at in your life right now and competing as an Olympic athlete. That's what you should be focused on right now. If we can help you with your OPSEC, like we'll help you. You know, focus on.
Let's stand up a BlackBerry server. We will rent them all out. BlackBerries.
Yeah, right. Silent Circle was a pretty cool platform as well. Signal is a great way to communicate securely. I think it's a pretty high bar for China. I mean, it's not impossible by any stretch, but I think Signal is a really great platform for secure communications that athletes should be using. So if you're listening and you know an Olympic athlete, highly recommend Signal. As a communication mechanism with your friends and family for posting stuff. And maybe when you get home, put that shit on Twitter or Instagram.
And
right?
like the other ones too. Like I was shocked. I saw a commercial on TV the other day for WhatsApp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Something is better than nothing.
True.
They're also going to be going through the SIM. Like you're going to end up with carrier issues because of where you're going. You've got the Great Wall of China that is going to be monitoring like your ability to get communications out anyway. And so you're injecting a SIM. You're writing a carrier network that's owned by the government, and you're going through a firewall that is going to see all that traffic. So
you're going through a firewall that is great.
Yep. Is there any satellite options? That's the only question.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, Joff. That would be a great kind of backdoor. Lee?
I was thinking I'd still kind of want to take the DEF CON approach, keeping the phone in airplane mode. Don't use any networks you're not trusting. Use a VPN when you're online. A few things like that.
Those are going to get people with.
Well, we know regimes that aren't all about privacy are looking to ban
what was this one?
VPNs. That's a segue.
Myanmar?
How do you say that, Tyler?
Myanmar.
Yeah, they're looking to a new cyber law to jail anyone using a VPN, and I think in certain governments, this is a thing. So this is Burma.
No, it's Myanmar. It's
formerly Burma. Formerly Burma.
Yeah.
It's basically a war against encrypting your traffic. That's what it is.
And the other one too, I think they need to, and I know they won't because reasons. They need to define what a VPN is. Specifically, technically, because I can use an SSH tunnel.
Be a VPN,
and that could be a VPN, and at this point, I could be, sent to prison for using a VPN if I tunnel all my traffic over an SSH.
Because it's virtual and it's private and it's a network.
Well, they banned social media last year, right? Like that was part of the big thing. Like they are the next North Korea with the way that they're handling the internal.
Yeah.
Well, it's awfully convenient for governments to not put specific, precise definitions on anything.
Yep, exactly,
John. Yeah,
exactly.
Because reasons.
Yep, because it gives them a lot of leeway.
What does that get you with HTTPS or like a good TLS, which most sites require now? Like, what does that get you other than telemetry data?
Pretty much that's it.
Yeah, I mean, barring having access to the VPN provider,
so
right? Get you telemetry.
One of the countries out there required you to install their security certificate because they were man-in-the-middling all internet-based traffic.
Ugh.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Don't you feel like I got to take a shower after that one?
Mm-hmm. For sure.
I think that was Myanmar that did that. It was either that or
I'm trying to remember.
Maybe it was one of the Eastern blocs.
Either way, still terrifying. And
I don't remember.
Speaking of North Korea, there was the quote, the late breaking news, the one that you saw earlier right before the show.
Yeah.
North Korea hacked him, so he took
this
down
was
his internet.
A Wired article that broke. Looks like this morning.
Yep.
Just before noontime this morning by Andy Greenberg, nonetheless.
Yep.
It broke so fast. I haven't read the article other than the headline of North Korea hacked him, so he took down its internet.
Yeah, so effectively what happened here, a hacker that goes by P4x or PAX was a victim of one of those hacking campaigns against Western security researchers last year, effectively delivering them malware and so forth to get control of their systems. I'd argue that North Korea was trying to gain access to the hacker systems so that they could find out which 0 days they were working on, so that they could steal the 0 days. Whatever.
I think there's a lot of that happens today.
Whatever the motivation was, PAX effectively got an email from another hacker friend with an executable saying, "Hey, look at this thing that I found," or "Look what I got." And turns out it was something that had come from North Korea to this other associate. Associate sent it to him. He ran it in a VM, did some investigation in it, and found out, holy crap, this is North Korean malware. And it was sent to me by another security researcher and so forth. And he went to the FBI and said, WTF, like they're targeting us, North Korea. Here's the this nation state level thing against quote benign hackers and so forth, and nobody did anything. So he said, well, drop the mic, I'm gonna go do some scanning in North Korea, and found out that there was a bunch of stuff in North Korea that was running ancient versions of Nginx and Apache and all sorts of other stuff, and totally hacked the shit out of them and took all of their internet points offline at once.
I find when you articulate that, Larry, my mind immediately goes to, if you're a hacker and you take out North Korea, is the U.S. government going to be upset with you? Probably not, right? Which I think is really...
They're probably going to secretly go, thanks so much, but we're not going to publicly acknowledge this, right?
Right. Yeah, we're not going to acknowledge that, like, we're giving you a free pass or anything like that, but, like, hey, whatever. But that goes both ways, right? That goes both ways.
And if you've ever looked, by the way, not that this really matters, but DPRK, North Korea, is granted a /22. That's the extent of their internet.
The publicly facing internet.
Right.
It's a whole lot of NAT.
Yeah.
Or actually, not
a whole lot of NAT going on. There's
maybe
not
a whole
lot of cross.
Maybe not.
There's probably a whole lot of cross-country allocation too. I bet you China has given them a few networks.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But
because similar to that, over in the country of Andorra, their whole internet was taken out by a DDoS account. They only have one ISP in the whole country, so it was designed to take out people participating in a Minecraft tournament for whatever reason, but it took out everybody, all the homes, businesses, government, the whole 9 yards with one DDoS attack.
Dave Vitale is also quoted in this article as quoted as being similarly targeted in the same espionage campaign.
I believe it. You think about it.
I'd be like, knowing Dave, he's no reason to lie about it, right?
Yeah,
Dave, I liked. In fact, Dave should come back on the show. I haven't talked to Dave in a while.
And you think about what what Dave's been involved in for years, in effectively trading trading in 0 day.
Right.
They want that shit. Admittedly, and part of the reason why I'm saying that, like, admittedly, I'm listening to Kim Zetter's "This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends."
No, that's
it's Kim
not Kim Zetter.
No, it's not Kim Zetter.
That's the other lady.
I'll tell you right now.
Washington Post, New York Times, one of those. New York Times. She's New York Times. What's her name? Mm-hmm. Now it's escaping me. It's
Nicole
not
Perloff.
Yeah, Nicole Perloff.
Yep. I'm listening to it.
Yeah.
And I'm listening to it in its entirety, because I want to know how bad or bad it isn't. Mm-hmm. Quite honestly, this is the first book that I'm going to review for the cybersecurity Canon project. It's already been reviewed.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's already been reviewed, but we can do multiple reviews, and I want to know what the stink is. And
good for you. Yeah.
So I'm soldiering through it. I got quite a ways to go, but it's very much at the point where, hey, David Tell managed 0 days, so I can understand why they'd want access to his stuff. So he owns a company that manages 0 days. I get it.
There was more stuff I want to talk about before
So what's next?
Apple pays $100,000 roughly, what they're calling a Mac webcam hack. However, when you dig into the details of this, it's more than just like you read. So one of the things I want to get out there for our audience is it's touted as I'm going to find an exploit or vulnerability and exploit that gives me access to your camera. But it's so much more than that.
This is a cloud service attack. This
is like your whole browser history and so much more. So I don't want people to read this as unauthorized camera access. It's not. It's every website you've ever visited kind of attack. And I want to credit the original researcher who I linked to, in Ryan Pinkren. Yeah, and that link is in the show notes. Go read that article because he explains everything that he got. So yes, he says I gained unauthorized access to the camera by exploiting a series of issues with iCloud sharing, and it requires the victim to click open on a pop-up from the website. Results in more than just multimedia permission hijacking. It gives the attacker full access to every website ever visited by the victim. Oof. In addition to turning on your camera, it can hack your iCloud, PayPal, Facebook, Gmail. Sounds like a session cookie stealing attack as well.
That's really bad.
Yeah,
that's really bad. Right, this is way beyond just
ruining your day.
Sounds like Safari doesn't understand sandboxes. Maybe they should hop on the Chromium wagon and just stop trying to roll their own browser like Microsoft did.
Boom. I agree, Tyler. I mean, drop the mic. It's really
There it is.
How many times have we seen WebKit? In all of Apple's platforms, have these vulnerabilities. I mean, like Pwn to own after Pwn to own. All this stuff comes out, and all these various vulnerabilities and exploits point back to that. I'm digging the Brave browser, which is Chromium based. I think that its ad blocking is pretty good. I think its search is okay. It's not Google, and I still think the accuracy of Google, right, is but the privacy you give up for that is within question. I like its ability to spin up a Tor browser rate. I've had great success bypassing a lot of things within Brave natively and just going, hey, access this website over Tor. In having good things happen. I think performance-wise, it's really good. I like that on mobile, it can implement that ad blocking, which is one of my concerns I brought up on a previous show, in that when you're on a mobile device and you're loading things from recipes to whatever you're clicking on in social media, if it's opening within the browser, within the social media app, security is heinous.
Yep.
Oftentimes you can configure that to dump out to your external default browser, right? And if your external default browser is Brave, I think you're increasing your not just privacy but also security in that same realm. So again, and just coming back to Safari and this bug,
But so, first question: who uses Safari on the Mac?
I think a lot of people still.
I never did. I
mean, we might not.
I really.
I never did. I hate to say it. I do use Safari on the Mac, but I use it for one freaking website, and that's my banking website because it doesn't work in any other browser.
Yeah,
I used to use it in Chrome, and shit happened in Chrome, and then I used to use it in Firefox. No, I used to use it in Firefox, and shit happened in Firefox that, like, every 2 days I have to clear all my cache and dump everything to make it work. And then it was starting to happen in Chrome, but it works in Safari. And Safari is a piece of shit. So the other one is that I really need to move away from Safari on my mobile device.
Try Brave.
The problem that I have is right now I have about 120 tabs open in Safari on my phone.
Wow.
But I need to move those to the other browser so I can either bookmark them or
start
do
over. Start over in Brave. I'm telling you, dude.
But
it's good.
Session buddy.
What's that?
Session Buddy.
Session Buddy? I'll ping you. I'll ping you
Session
later.
Buddy to move your sessions from one browser to the other.
Now, what is it? Is it a session or just the URL? Because many of these
It's
are non-session.
just URLs.
Okay, good. Because like I found an article like that's the top one in my list from like 6 years ago that it's like recipes from Lord of the Rings. Like I'll never find that article again if I look for it.
Recipe what?
We have scripts that do that, Larry. Just use one of those scripts that we do to dump open tabs out to the CSV file.
But this is on my iPhone, Tyler.
So I use a bookmarking service, Larry, is really good. Like I use Instapaper.
Yep.
And like if you're a content creator, don't listen to this. But if you save a website to a bookmarking service like Instapaper, for example, it saves a clear text version, if you will, of that website. So if you go to a recipe, right, and it loads a million different ads, which like the security person in all of us cringes when that happens.
Oh yeah.
So I save that to a bookmarking service, then I go back to that in my bookmarking service, and it's just the text, and it doesn't load all of the advertisements. So I mean, I think a lot of us could actually build this service. Actually, the developer of Instapaper is like a Silicon Valley kind of person that like stands this up. And I'm like, dude, you should charge money for this.
That's
like,
otherwise known in Chrome as reader mode.
Yeah. And there's a lot of different services. I happen to use a service called Instapaper, right? And there's a dozens of them out there.
See, and I'd happily do that. The problem is that I can't get any of, and maybe I'm wrong. Please point me wrong. I'd love to use Pinboard within that Safari browser on the mobile device to just go Pinboard, and I do that in a heartbeat, and I dump it. Right now, it's not that easy.
Check out Instapaper.
I use Instapaper.
Yeah.
But
you can share it, so when you open it up on a browser on your phone, you share it to Instapaper. It gets stored there permanently.
Now
you can read the content within your Instapaper app on your phone.
Now you're using Android.
Yes.
I'm not.
I don't know how that works on
exactly.
iOS. I'm assuming the same way. And then
Safari on mobile bites the wax tadpole.
But then I can go on Brave and I can open that in a Tor browser if I further need to get around any other restrictions.
I just need to get my bookmarks out of Safari on my mobile device somewhere else.
Yep.
Local privilege S in Windows is a good one.
Many of us, probably all of us hosting the show, have been asked, like, what keeps you up at night in terms of security stuff? Right? We've all been asked that question. Right? What doesn't? Right? That's a great answer, John.
Well, let's put it this way. I'll tell you what keeps me up at night about security stuff. Nothing, because it's all fucked.
Yeah. so you go to sleep just knowing it's all fucked.
Yep. I sleep like a baby. I wake up every 45 minutes and scream.
Because we have job security, because it's all fucked.
No. Honestly, I sleep really well because I just know that everything's screwed up and I can't worry about it all.
It's the bag of cash that keeps me up at night. Like, no matter what we do in the name of security to help secure ourselves, our family, our friends, the world from all of the evil attackers in the world. And I've said this on the show before, right? Like, the person that shows up to specific companies and or people that work for those companies with a bag of cash, those are the people that hold that bag of cash can essentially compromise whoever they want. And that's what keeps me up at night. Like, I think if I had to answer the question, it'd be like the people that can show up with a bag of cash. And so there's an article that I found that there was reportedly the NSO group showed up at telecom companies with bags of cash to buy access to its cellular networks, ostensibly so its clients could track specific mobile users in the United States. Now, whether that's true or not, like I mean, we could debate that till the cows come home, and we're not gonna know the answer. We could do some investigative journalism and maybe come to that answer. NSO Group is going to be particularly difficult from a journalistic standpoint to come to that conclusion. I think there are probably governments within this world that want to come to those same answers. They're going to maybe even have a tough time. And I'm not knocking NSO Group, and I'm not knocking Israel. They're in a very specific situation, which many of us in the world really can't fully understand, right? And so I want to give a lot of respect to that. Put that issue aside. Anyone that shows up with a bag of cash to extort anyone that works for any company in the world, that's what keeps me up at night, right? And we've seen instances, and this is just one, whether it's true or not, regardless, that's scary.
Yeah, I mean, I think you need a little additional adjective there, and that would be sizable bag of cash, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
like what's the size? Yeah, right. Like what's the
right?
Like life-changing bag of cash, which
life-changing,
life-changing
depends
bag.
on that person's life, right? Like how big that bag of cash is to influence that person. I mean, we're talking about extortion. This is not, holy shit, this is not something new. I mean, this is something that you could go back in history thousands of years, right? That is ostensibly a security threat. I mean, to quote the article, right? Like, I mean, this is a security threat.
So, like, I take a different tact on that. Like you say, that the thing that keeps you up at night is the attacker with the bag of cash. See, that doesn't keep me up at night because it's going to happen. Long live privacy. Privacy is dead. I get it. It's over. I'm a realist. What keeps me up at night about that situation is, holy shit, where'd they get a bag of cash and where can I get one?
Yeah.
Even though they say money won't buy you happiness, like, I'd like to try.
I mean, but to your point, Larry, maybe it's not a bag of cash. Maybe it's a cryptocurrency wallet. Maybe it's cryptocurrency.
That's a bag of cash.
That's a bag of cash. I mean, it is a modern day bag of cash. Right, Tyler? It's a modern day. Every show we have to go back to poor Tyler's cryptocurrency woes, as it were.
I'm just not going to show up, guys. You'll know why.
Yep. Speaking of we need to get the heck out of here. Speaking of crypto,
do we have one? We had one silly article, Larry.
Whoa! Speaking of cryptocurrency, hacking the Trezor wallet with Joe Grand.
Oh yeah,
a great YouTube show.
Love Joe Grand.
So there was a an article in one of the media one that sensationalizes stuff. Either way, they did a great job on the article, and then Joe Grand posted his YouTube video about it, and yeah, great stuff. And Trezor came out, and like everybody was all like jumping all over the story from Trezor, like, oh my god, Trezor responds, and everybody was all up front about the whole hacking of the Trezor wallet thing, saying, even Joe himself said, yeah, this shit is old. Like, this thing has been sitting in a drawer for 2 years. Of course it's not updated. And yes, they fixed it. Like, you go watch the video, he's like, yeah, this stuff is all fixed. But because this is an old version, we can hack the shit out of it. And Trezor is like, yeah, you hacked an old version, we fixed the shit. Yes, you did. So fun story, Paul.
New wearable tech could stop premature ejaculation.
Does it?
My mind goes to
give us a product review, Paul. Tell us.
So you got to test this, right? So you give it to people to test, and like they come back and be like, "No, it didn't work."
They come back,
right? The testing process is really interesting. Like,
ask him how he knows this,
whether it works or not. It was designed.
Well, I don't know whether Paul would know that. I mean, it sounds like a young man's problem, and I don't think Paul's a young man anymore.
It's almost the opposite now. Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, the creators of this product said it could lead to a more fulfilled and healthy sex life for those living with premature ejaculation. And so this is a patch that's worn between a man's scrotum and anus during sex and allows users to eliminate the urge to ejaculate, because this device, Larry, is Bluetooth controlled. And it's an app. That doesn't sound fun. It is an app that is Bluetooth. This device goes.
Hold on a minute, honey.
Hold on. Yeah, that's where my mind was going. Like, wait, hold on. Like, you got your phone out. Like,
I got to adjust my tantalizer.
The tantalizer. Right?
Tantalizer.
The medical term is the perineum. Joff. It's installed in your perineum.
Thanks for correcting me.
Yeah. So you install this device in your perineum
on your grundle. Yeah.
It is blue. I don't know if it's Bluetooth low energy.
It's your small device and you're sticking it to your asshole. Like it's Bluetooth low energy.
No. This is the space between.
I stand corrected. I stand corrected. It is a sticker you're putting on your grundle. It's Bluetooth low energy.
Grundle is another term.
Grundle.
I've also heard it referred as the nacho because it's not your balls and it's not your asshole. Well, we got Joff with that one.
Tyler's like, what the fuck?
It's a tantalizer. That's the device.
Tantalizer. Joff got the name
dude. Joff.
They should hire you for marketing because Joff like this is the tantalizer.
Joff to the web registrar ASAP, my good man. The tantalizer.com.
Tantalizer.com.
You'll notice my laptop is closed.
Oh God, I'm going to name.com right now.
But it legit. So there is a tiny battery and Bluetooth transmitter
low energy
that can link to your phone.
It's low energy.
Yes. Yeah. So I don't know if this is a hackable kind of thing.
Yes. It's low energy.
Oh, just the hacking. What is the security around this? I don't know.
It's low energy.
So what did they say? That having sex is like burning enough calories that you ran 8 miles. Who the hell runs 8 miles in 30 seconds? Seriously.
Dude, 15 minutes. Come on.
Dude, you need the tantalizer.
They don't have a cost on the device yet, but
$300.
That's
I'm just guessing.
Again, they've done some research on this, obviously. We need to bring Renderman back. We need to bring Renderman back on the show to talk about this.
Tyler's on to this smart body stuff. Let's get him a product sample.
That doesn't seem to be a shocking thing, so I don't know.
He's just not impressed.
They just have to turn that one up to 11 for you, right, Tyler?
I guess so. I don't know. Bluetooth low energy doesn't go as far as we need, Larry, so... Sorry.
Ouch.
Well, I mean, again, like the usability of the low energy, you got to be in a certain proximity, Larry. What's the proximity of that?
It's 30 feet.
Yeah.
If not a little more.
But hopefully you're within 30 feet if you're having sex.
I mean, yeah, that
but
of
like
your phone.
But like again, you need to have this device
and then
underneath your junk and have your phone at the same time.
And low energy is 2.4 gigahertz and a great barrier to entry.
Interference come into play?
Not interference, but barriers to RF energy. Great barrier to 2.4 gigahertz is water. You're made 70% of water. So you've got this thing jammed halfway up your ass. Like it's not.
No. Again, Larry, this is in your perineum.
It's jammed up your butt cheeks. Underneath your balls.
Between, yes, the perineum, Larry. The correct medical term is perineum.
Okay.
Is that your gooch?
Yes, it is your gooch. Thank you, Tyler, for another acronym for this area of your body.
It's not an acronym.
Is it an acronym?
It's not an acronym. That would be an abbreviation, like MASH.
Wow.
Goochalizer.
Goochalizer.com. Goochinator. Goochinator.
Oh, yeah, $9.99. I could get Goochalizer.
Goochalizer.com. And,
oh, God, that'd be a waste of money.
I mean, we were talking about the metaverse and all these different, just when does science fiction really cross into technology, security, and your sex life? I mean, it's really where the story is.
The internet is made for porn. Really.
When is it not?
Yeah.
How did the internet actually get funded?
The internet's for porn. The internet is for porn.
Crazy stuff, man.
Yep.
Well, Larry, with that, and the Gucci and the Nacho, take us out.
Over and...
Taint possible.
Ouch!